Okay. You ready, Jim? Welcome everyone to the Ordinary Council meeting of the Wyndham City Council this Tuesday the 8th of November 2017. In the spirit of reconciliation, before we begin this meeting, I acknowledge the peoples of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which Windham is being built. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Please stand for the opening prayer. We pray for guidance in the Council's decision-making to achieve the best outcome for the people of Windham. Thank you. I'd like to welcome members of the gallery, press, councillors and staff who have joined us for this meeting. I would also specifically like to welcome some of the current participants of Wyndham's Building Blocks Community Leadership Program, who are here to observe local democracy in action. Wyndham's Building Blocks is a 10-week program that seeks to develop the leadership capacity of local residents. I understand the group attending tonight are from the Raising Middle Years Children's Program and are currently exploring opportunities to further enhance and develop in this area. The program commenced as a pilot in 2014, and since that time, more than 260 locals have undertaken and successfully completed the program, and many have gone on to do some great work in the community. I thank you for devoting your time in working with us, and we wish you all the best for your community leadership journeys. Some of you have seen the notices in the foyer, but for those of you who didn't, I would like to make you aware of the following. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the internet. The recording will be archived and made available on Council's website. Whilst all care has been taken to ensure that your privacy is maintained, please be aware that your presence may be recorded. Madam CEO, do we have any apologies or requests for leave for absence?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we have an apology from Councillor Heather Marcus this evening.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Marcus is representing the Council at another function, so I do thank her for that, and that's the reason why she's not with us tonight. Could I have a mover of that motion? Councillor Mcelhaney. And a seconder, Councillor Gibbons. Councillors, if there isn't any further discussion on that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Declaration by councillors of disclosure of conflict of interest or conflicting personal interest in any item on the agenda. So, councillors, does anyone have any conflicts of interest they may wish to declare in relation to tonight's agenda? No? Thank you. I shall move on. The next item on the agenda is 3A. It's a code of conduct apology. At this point, Councillor Khan, I invite you to respond.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, giving me an opportunity to offer an apology in relation to my comments made on Facebook, which is, before I start, it's important me to clarify what was my comment on Facebook. I wrote on Facebook, suggested I strongly oppose the Council's attempt to frustrate the Labor government's attempt to bring a culture precinct to celebrate Indian culture. Why did it take over a year to appoint consultant to do feasibility, and now the name has been sneakily changed to South Asian Culture Precinct instead of Indian? Council should have consulted first before changing the name. I stand with the state government's decisions to build a precinct dedicated to the world's oldest culture identity, Indian community. Now, my word was posted on Facebook, but my intention was to advocate for the cause we fought in the last term, to build or to advocate for Indian culture community. I do apologize, though some of the word could have reverted differently, that might not have offended anyone in the community member or a councillor or anybody who believes to be my word was inappropriate. But I have also observed that another city councillor from Manor City Council, Councillor Jeff Lake, who posted a comment regarding my comment and his view, saying that possibly the most bizarre attack on freedom of political comments we have seen in Australia's history. I honestly regret I could have made this
Councillor
comment differently.
Khan, I must interrupt you in that you were cited, wrongly or rightly in your view, you were cited, and you are been asked by your fellow councillors to make an apology, not quote councillors from councils elsewhere as to what they thought about your post. So I would like you to bring back directly to the fact of the request by your fellow councillors to actually just apologise for not only that post but comments you made later, and that if you could please just stick to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I understand the comments are very, very interesting, and I am sure some of them, you have made a comment on Facebook. I regret my comments. I say again and again, but it's important me to say why I made this comment, what the rationale behind the comment, and I honestly now offer a sincere apology if it hurts you or any councillor or any public member, but my intention was not to hurt anybody, just express my views. And I think if anybody have heard with my comments, I again now offer sincere apology. I have not done nothing wrong, but I've been suspended for that.
I ask you, Councillor Khan, again, you claim that you did nothing wrong, but you are found to have done something wrong by the due processes of the Code of Good Governance and the fact that there was an arbiter put in charge of that and the comments that were made. Again, I ask you to seek an apology as was requested. And again, we cannot go over past history, whether any of us were right or wrong. Your role is to make an apology as requested. So I ask you again to be able to do that, please. It's a very simple request.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm sure that, I think my offering my comments was wrong and it could reword it. Language was not appropriate, I understand, but I just like to say that my intention was in the spirit of community not to hurt anybody if anybody had believed that. So my intention is not to drag the council into the matter and debate and giving your clarification why should I offer apology, offer sincere apology, and I look forward to work with the good governance and follow the councillors, including you and other councillors, and advocate for the community. And I intentionally and I support any good community freedom of speech should be there, but I think the word should be the correct. And in that case, I was incorrect. So I understand that, the apology has to be offered. So I'm happy to be offered, or anybody have been offended with my wording, and I would be now not be using Facebook in a manner who can offend anybody and they can hurt anyone. But can I say I'm a human being? I haven't intentionally offended anyone, but I will be now seeking someone to write a proper comment if I need to make a comment, but not offend anyone if anybody have been offended. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, giving me an opportunity. Thank you for your support and assistance. Bye now.
And thank you, Councillor Khan, for that apology. Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll now move on to the rest of the business. So that's duly noted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank
you. Councillors, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have a mover? Councillor Gibbons. A seconder? Councillor Villagonzalo. Councillors, is there any discussion on that item? If there's no discussion, I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Against? You're abstaining, Councillor Khan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, because I was not there, so I want to be abstaining for the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Can we mark that for the records that Councillor Khan abstained from that vote because he hadn't been at the previous meeting? Okay, so that motion is carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 5, which is deputations and presentations. And in fact, councillors and the chamber, 5.1 is the Mayoral Youth Awards. And there is another item, 5.2, which is the acknowledgement of the Victorian Early Years Awards, which Councillor Josh Gilligan will make a speech on those awards. And at the conclusion of the Youth Awards that I'll be presenting. Thank you. This is a little bit more formal, isn't it, standing at the lectern? But anyway, Windham City is proud to recognise the fantastic achievements and contributions made by young people in the community. Each quarter, a number of young people aged from 12 to 25 years are presented with a Mayoral Youth Award, which includes a certificate of recognition and a grant of $500. The award recognises achievements in 3 categories: sport, arts and culture, and community service, volunteering and leadership. The applications are assessed by a panel that consists of the Windham City Mayor and the Youth Project Officer, Youth Services staff members, and the young people from the Windham Youth Task Force. Recipients of the award also go into the running to be named for the very prestigious Windham's Young Achiever of the Year. Tonight, I have pleasure in making 3 presentations for the September quarter of 2017. The first recipient is Lachlan Creaner. Now, Lachlan, I don't know what you want, the $500 or the certificate, but you're going to get both. So there you are. Congratulations. Now, Lachlan, I'm just going to read a little bit about you, and then I'm hoping that you'll say a few words. Lachlan is 21 years old and lives in Tarneek. He's been recognised for his achievements in sport. Lachlan participated in the Hoppers Crossing Auskick during his years in primary school, and in high school went on to become an assistant coach. After high school, Lachlan became the lead coach for Auskick at Hoppers Crossing, taking charge of running the clinic for different year levels. He currently coaches years 4, 5 and 6, planning drills and training strategies to teach the participants football skills. Again, congratulations, Lachlan, on your achievements in sport.
Thank you very much. It's really pretty amazing to be recognised for this, for something I've been doing for so long, but for something I also really enjoy doing, because I do really love teaching my kids. They are very important to me, and this is something that I've been doing ever since I was in Auskick, from when I was about 5 years old. So to be a part of it is incredible, and to be recognised it is really special. Thank you very much.
Well done. The second recipient is Joshua Ephraim's. Joshua, are you in there? Congratulations. Now, there's your envelope and your certificate. Now, you're going to stay here with me, aren't you? Come over here. That's all right, I don't bite. Some people think I do, but I don't. Now, Joshua. He's 15 years old and lives in Werribee. Now, he's been recognised for his contributions in arts and culture. Joshua is currently completing Grade 8 classical piano after having achieved high distinctions throughout preliminary to Grade 7. Is that right? Well done. He's been a band member of the Heathdale Christian College in strings, wind and full orchestra on violin since 2012. He has played for various college musical productions, including Oklahoma, Oliver, and Fiddler on the Roof. Joshua is a member of the college choir and has competed in many choral competitions. He has been teaching himself to DJ, learning how to create, mix and master his own compositions from scratch. He has created his own SoundCloud account, very impressive, Triple J profile and Instagram music page. Congratulations, Joshua, on your achievements in the arts and culture category.
Thank you very much for the award. First and foremost, I want to thank God for this opportunity. I'd also like to thank my family for supporting me from the very beginning. And I'd like to thank the council for this award. I really appreciate it, as well as the other recipients as well. So thank you.
Well done. Now, the third and final recipient tonight is Liana Georgia Kopoulos. Liana, here she comes. Congratulations, Liana. No, don't run away. Stay close. Okay. Liana is 16 years old and lives in Werribee. She is being recognised for her achievements in arts and culture. Liana is a member of the instrumental music program at Windham Central College, playing in the string orchestra, and is also an accomplished pianist. You should get together with Joshua, I think, and probably form a duo. She's been part of every school musical and performance since she started at the school in Year 7 and participates in music events held outside of school, such as parent and partner evenings, local primary school events, and the Bairnsdale Camp Experience. Bairnsdale's a long way from here. Liana actively encourages other students to participate at their highest levels and assists Year 7s with their transition into high school. Congratulations again, Liana. Here is your cheque and your certificate. And of course, you get to make a speech.
I would like to thank my family and my teacher, Miss Ferranda, for nominating me for the award. It's really great to get this award to show everyone that I'm an active member of the community. So I'd like to thank the council. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure to support hard-working and young talented people, because those young people are the future leaders of our city, I'm sure. Now, I'm pleased to advise that the Windham City Council was recently awarded 2 Victorian Early Years Awards by the Victorian State Government. I will now ask the Learning City Portfolio Chair, Councillor Josh Gilligan, to provide the background to this award and to present the certificate to Council.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'll take the honour of using the microphone here. Look, it was a great privilege to represent Windham City Council at the Victorian Early Years Awards, which occurred on October 23rd of this year. And those awards were presented by the Minister for Early Childhood Education, Jenny Makakos, of the National Gallery of Victoria. The awards recognise extraordinary achievements of early childhood professionals and partnerships designed to improve health, learning, development and well-being of young children. Over 80 nominations were received from across the state, and it was absolutely fantastic to see that Windham received 2 of those awards in what is an ultra-competitive environment. Windham City kindergartens were recognised for their work in improving the access and participation of Aboriginal children and their families in kindergartens. The partnerships include Reconciliation Australia, so the Narragansawiri, the Uncle Ian from the Wurundjeri Tribal Land Council, the Wathaurong Aboriginal Corporation and Parks Victoria. This program has resulted in an increase in the participation of Aboriginal children in kindergartens by 70% since 2012. And all 23 of Windham City Council's kindergartens have a reconciliation action plan and actively incorporate Indigenous history and culture into their programs. The other award, which was the Maternal and Child Health Award, was recognised for their work in the Healthy Happy Beginnings for refugee mothers and babies. This program is led by the Murdoch Research Institute and highlights what can be achieved when we have a collaborative approach that is used to deliver healthcare and support during pregnancy. And this program has been delivered to 100 women. Other partners include the Mercy Hospitals Victoria, the Vic SEG New Futures and the Victorian Foundation for Survivors of Torture. It is fair to say that Council continuously strives to deliver high quality programs that are tailored to meet community needs. And it is wonderful that we have been recognised as state leaders in the provision of these important early years services, publicly owned and operated services. Finally, before I present the award to you, Mr Mayor, I'd like to acknowledge the contribution of our community, in particular Wyndham's Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and refugee communities, all of the partner agencies that have been outlined, and of course our staff. And it was great to be with the staff not too much longer after that, advocating for more funding in this space as well, Mr Mayor. Now, they have worked tirelessly together to ensure that Wyndham's children and families have access to such an innovative and groundbreaking program. And with that, I'll present you the award that we were fortunate enough to win. There you go, very good.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Not only do you represent your portfolio extremely well, that you're able to go to these events and come back bearing awards. And I'd just like to say that once again, the City of Windham is at the forefront of a great range of very important rewards by people who we don't control. Something just dropped down off the ceiling. It's great to make sure that the hard work that not only our council officers but councillors put in are rewarded by these recognitions. So once again, thank you for that. Oh. I was wondering what was flying across the room. It was a rubber band. Okay. Now, councillors, we'll go on to item 6.1, which is petitions. I believe there aren't any. And so therefore we'll move on to item 6.2.1, which is the Wyndham Sports Strategy 2045 adoption. And could we have a mover for that, please? Councillor Maynard, and a seconder, Councillor Hooper. Thank you. Councillors, any discussion? Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, in supporting the officer's recommendation, I would like to provide the following narrative. In the Wyndham Sports Strategy, there are a number of points I would like to highlight in relation to the document heading to 2045, and whilst I do understand it says 2045, it will be reviewed every 5 years. A number of things that this strategy hopes to achieve is ensuring people can participate in a diverse range of sports within the municipality. That it is also ensuring all people are included in all elements of community life and have the opportunity to participate, and that gender equity, cultural equity and social equity in sport are paramount. I would also like to highlight the following as outlined in this report. The strategy captures the rich diversity of sports and active recreation pursuits in our community. The strategy models each sport and creates a benchmark for the future of facility provision and access. Most importantly, our community seeks places which are close to their homes. They want places which can support their families, sport and recreation aspirations and interests, and places that are inclusive. The strategy will sustainably set Windham on a course for meaningful places and spaces for the community to engage in healthy living. The draft Wyndham Sports Strategy had been on public exhibition between 2nd August and 4th September this year. The exhibition period provided the opportunity for the community to engage and provide feedback on this document, and a number of residents, sports clubs, commercial sports providers and industry representatives provided feedback on the strategy. It is important to note that this project was listed as a key initiative in the Wyndham City Plan 2016-2017. And the figures as outlined in this report are substantial to say the least, and reflect the basic needs of our residents, and they speak to the dedication and accuracy of this report. This report results from a substantial amount of research and collection and collation of factual data and information by council officers, in particular Serous, who was Council's team leader, Recreation, Strategy, Sport and Recreation. It is important to note, Mr Mayor, that the total estimated spend to 2045 on sport alone in this municipalities is estimated at $971 million. The net estimated cost to council is just on $420 million, so the difference will be grants and the developer contributions and things of such. But it certainly outlines what's needed in this community moving forward to 2045 and provide our residents with their basic needs in this municipality. The strategy provides a solid and evidence-based plan for the best sport and recreation outcomes for the community. Our research has shown that more than 3/4 of our residents are engaged in some form of sport and active recreation. This has great benefits for their physical and mental health, yet unfortunately as a society we are still becoming less active. This strategy responds to this and looks to locate facilities to maximise participation in a sustainable way. This thorough strategy puts Windham at the forefront of sport and recreation planning in growth areas as it focuses on providing facilities for all the different ways that the community participates, not just organised competitive sport. Again, as I say, Mr Mayor, a big pat on the back for Serous, Council's team leader, Recreation, Sport and Strategy, for researching and developing this draft document, which is now coming to the chamber. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Councillors, any other discussion? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First, I'd like to echo Councillor Maynard's pat on the back there to the staff. They've put a lot of work and diligence into this report, and I think the quality of the writing and the actual outcomes show that. I'm pleased to see that around 40 submissions were made to the draft strategy, which was put out by Council for community consultation during August and September. Clearly, this strategy struck a chord with many in our community who are committed to the role that sports plays in our lives. I note that 3 main themes are included in this report: diversity of sporting choice, supporting existing clubs, and demand for aquatic facilities in Windham. I endorse these 3 themes and also the ways in which the strategy proposes to respond to them, which are outlined in detail across pages 14 and 15 of the agenda. I also note the very detailed communications strategy, the plan for the community after Council considers, and I trust supports, the recommended adoption of this strategy tonight. Mr Mayor, there is strong support in our community for aquatic facilities. This comes as little surprise to me. In some ways, we're a victim of our own success with much higher than expected visitation and use of the Aquatic Pulse Centre, or Aquapulse Centre, but we'll need to address this unmet need in the future. So I'm glad to see that this theme is being addressed with the preliminary planning for the aquatic facility at 1160 Sayers Road, planning for the residents of tomorrow to avoid the mistakes of today. A theme seeing much airtime later tonight. I'd also like to touch on the subject of the Point Cook Aquatic Facility provision, something that has come up in the feedback of this strategy. The Windham Aquatic Strategy 2015 states at item 4.6.d, it is appropriate that the first 2 years of the operations of the 80 Derrimut Road site, it's to see the likely impact on the visitation, and Point Cook residents should be viewed and assessed with the view for Council to further consider at that time whether aquatic services to Point Cook residents are being addressed adequately and provided, or if there's gaps in the marketplace. It is now 2 years down the road. But returning to the theme of diversity in sports, Mr Mayor, I'm glad to see the inclusion of a proposed cycling sports, including criterium, circuits and velodrome facilities. I support the investigation of the inclusion of these cycling sports, potentially within the Laurie Emmons Reserve Master Plan, which staff will embark upon next year. One of my objectives coming onto Council was looking at a location on Aviation Road, to not just provide for the needs of Melbourne West cyclist community, but to also provide an open air space for fairs, fetes, carols by candlelight and other community gatherings for the communities of Point Cook, Williams Landing, Truganina, Werribee South and beyond. Irrespective of the location, this would be a boon for Windham, and Laurie Emmons is a more centralised and more accessible location for residents across the city. We only need to look at the Tom's Flood Sports Centre in Bendigo, which is not only hosts the Madison, but at times has hosted other major sporting and cultural events, from food festivals, Easter Fair, music. The velodrome has seen a lot more than just cyclists riding around in circles. And finally, Mr. Mayor, I did want to reinforce the point I made earlier regarding the high level of community engagement and support for this strategy. With 606 residents responding to the online survey, 1,200 responding to the telephone survey, and 70 clubs providing direct support and feedback, it certainly had a lot of going over. So I'd like to thank our dedicated and professional staff for all the hard work in this effort. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper, and the velodrome concept's a very interesting one, isn't it? Councillors, any more discussion on that item? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point out that there's some big numbers in this report, as we've been talking about, but as the holder of the family-friendly city portfolio, community health and wellbeing is really important, and sport plays a really important part of that in our community. And I think this is a really fantastic strategy with a lot of really thoughtful planning that's gone into it to cater to the needs of our community going forward. And certainly as a mother with a 5-year-old son, I look forward to him being able to use many of these facilities over the years as we look to plan out to the year 2045. So thank you, and thank you to council officers for the great work that's been done.
Very good. When he's 33. How old will that make you, Amir? Okay, thank you for that. Councillors, is there any other discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you. Councillors, the next item is 6.2.2, Windham Park Redevelopment. The Council approved the undertaking of a community consultation on the Windham Park concept design. Do we have a mover? Councillor Shaw. Seconder? Councillor Khan. Councillors, any discussion?
Yes. Get my microphone back to you.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, actually, tonight is one of those nights when I do feel proud to be not only a Windham resident, but an elected councillor and community representative making a difference. It's also important to celebrate things we can achieve by working with and listening to our communities. Before speaking further to report, I do need to acknowledge the work done by the previous council on helping to get us to where we are today, as well as to acknowledge the $3.2 million in state government growing suburbs funding, which will sit alongside a commitment from this council of $8.2 million for the Windham Park redevelopment. Tonight we are endorsing a concept design for an underutilised yet potentially magnificent part of Werribee, Windham Park. I have spoken on many previous occasions about the need to consider the Werribee City Centre, Genocide Park, Windham Park and the many homes and businesses and other attractions as a whole. I've also talked about the importance of linking and activating all these areas for the community and how important this is for family life, local health and our economic success. So I am keen to hear the community's views on our draft concept summarised on page 20 of the agenda. We particularly want to know what people think about how they'd like to use the planned spaces, the recreation areas, equipment, facilities, and what type of events they'd like to see happen in this transformed space. I applaud officers for putting together a detailed and thorough community and stakeholder consultation process, which will kick off with a formal launch on Friday, 17 November. Everyone in this room should know how much of a passion I have for open spaces and recreation facilities that support local livability in all its forms. It's one of the reasons I call myself a proud Werribee local. It's also one of the reasons I wanted to stand for council. To see all of these assets better linked and connected so locals can access high quality local open space facilities as well as larger sub-regional and regional facilities. I think it's fair to say that Windham City is doing its bit to improve local livability, and this new premier regional park and all its facilities and spaces will be highly valued and used. Mr. Mayor, it's truly an honour to serve a community that has understood the value of our local natural and recreational assets, and you have encouraged us to leverage and develop these, which will happen in a few years following this detailed community consultation. I think this report and this project are truly examples of what makes us stand out as a great place to continue to live, work and play. I therefore warmly recommend the motion to all my councillor colleagues tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, any other comments? Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've substantially cut down what I was going to say, but it's all good. I understand the passion. Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to say in supporting this recommendation that I urge all residents to provide their feedback and comments or suggestions to this proposal. We are going to be spending your money, so we want to know what you think. We certainly need to have residents let us know what they want to see in Wyndham Park. Do they want passive space, a venue to have outdoor events such as live bands? I'd prefer to sort of see AC/DC playing, but that's just me. The louder the better. Or stage shows or impromptu events. We have what I believe in this at this point in time a unique opportunity to deliver this park into what I consider another jewel in Wyndham's crown. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Councillors, any other comments? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think Councillor Mayor Shaw have explained what is a great project to be for the community and why we love the community. I think this is important to know that the park will be close to the community. $11.4 million, which is council's money, will be $8.2 million. The funding, the council have to fund it. So that's significant dollars of your. Now, what I interest and what I've seen the report is what we're seeking, because we go outside and we saw a lot of parks now where you can take your family, also the adult can also exercise. So I've met a lot of residents and they have requested, you know, some of the other states we see the parks where people put the exercising equipment. So when you take your family, it just doesn't become a traditional park, it will be kind of active for the parents, for the kids, and as well as mum and dad. So I would like to see that, you know, there's something you put forward. This is just it's a great opportunity because it's going for community consultation. So you can demand, you can put your ideas, and that will be considered as per the case by case. What I'm interested now, saying that this is sort of park where you'll be seeing the equipment being installed, also though a stage where you can perform the free music, you can have a community events, and it is all close to CBD. It's not a park you need to actually walk. A lot of parks are not close to the train station, so that's one of those parks now. Luckily happen to be Werribee River and the train station, so you don't have to worry about bringing your cars. When you can literally walk and enjoy, and you can stay in. If you love to sort of walk in the CBD, you can enjoy the CBD food and as well enjoy. I think that will be really great. I think it's great work councillors are doing it. So it's your time now to put forward your thoughts and make the park can be the 21st century's park. What I will be interested in seeing the more LEDs and more high-tech music systems, so we can entertain the community and can celebrate all together as a strong community in Windham. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any other discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Okay. Councillors, next item is 6.3.1, telecommunications facility policy. Do we have a mover? Councillor Hooper. Seconder? Councillor Mcelhaney. Councillors, any discussion? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I strongly welcome tonight's consideration of this policy. From the outset, I want to highlight the fact this policy was requested by this council in response to lease and licensing applications from telecommunication companies to install telecommunication towers on council-owned and managed land. While we received a number of applications early in our term, and as a new council, I think we all shared the view that we needed stronger decision-making tools to consider future applications. We felt it was important to have a consistent way to consider and make decisions, especially given that legislation overseeing the installation and siting of towers and other facilities provided very little room for local council discretion. This is because the overriding need for these facilities, which I acknowledge is a legitimate need. I would also observe, Mr. Mayor, that this policy now request for it is, as a new council, highlights one thing that is different about our priorities. That is, we all share a common goal to better balance local amenity, environments and landscapes to ensure good outcomes for local neighbourhoods, communities, Wyndham as a whole. In this case, this means we are being quite deliberate in adopting a set of criteria for future decision making, so I highlighted we're talking about the future a fair bit, which I'm pleased to say will now include not only community benefit and financial impact, but also appropriate land use and neighbourhood amenity. Mr. Mayor, I won't go exhaustively through how these new criteria will play out and guide our future decisions, as we have a big agenda tonight. However, I would encourage the community and interested people to read section 4.6 of the policy on page 32 of this agenda. This section clearly shows that issues such as the most appropriate location options, rather than assuming the location applied for it is the most appropriate location, can now be factored in our decisions. This section also outlines a number of land use and impact criteria we can apply in future decisions. Mr. Mayor, some in the chamber might have noticed my recent amendment to paint one of these towers green. But with tonight's policy and motion before us, our ability to improve local neighbourhood amenity gets even stronger injection of support. I want to thank staff for consulting with councillors and drafting this policy. I believe by adopting it, we are demonstrating that while we may not always have the strongest legislative tools and powers to deal with community concerns, when the will exists, we can make our own actions to protect amenity in our local neighbourhoods. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Any other discussion? Councillor Mcelhaney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say further on from Councillor Hooper that if it wasn't for the residents' uproar earlier this year in regards to a telecommunication lease, that perhaps this policy would never have come about. So their continued persistence, but also I'd like to say that the councillors' persistence with officers to get a resolution, particularly I recall Councillor Mia Shaw requesting information, and we got legal advice and we took a chance in the chamber, and there has been nothing come back from Vodafone in regard to that, and basically there was no tower installed. But this policy now gives council real guidance, instead of constantly as one of these items come up, we all just roll our eyes and go, here we go again. At least now we've got a framework that we can work with that is consistent, and anyone wanting to put one of these up in the future, it'll be very clear what they can and can't do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mcelhaney. Councillors, any other discussion? If not, I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Next item is 6.3.2, which is Advocacy to Essential Services Commission, with a recommendation on page 36. Councillor Maynard. Very quick, I never even got to say who's moving. And second to Councillor Shaw. Okay. Councillors, any discussion? Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, in supporting the officer's recommendation, provide the following. The ESC should not be using CPI as a baseline for rate increase analysis. In fact, they should be focusing on developing an index that is reflective of local government cost drivers for growth councils and non-growth councils. Growth councils like Windham cannot sustain long-term viability in infrastructure provision if they are treated in the same manner as non-growth councils. Not only will this restrict infrastructure provision, it will severely impede our ability to meet our infrastructure asset renewal obligations. I've said time and time again in this chamber, I will totally accept rate capping if the state and federal governments provide adequate funding to enable us to meet the needs of our residents, of which we are growing at a rate of knots. Our infrastructure is not matching our growth, and we cannot expect residents to bear the whole burden of infrastructure provision and renewal. Both state and federal governments need to draw a line in the sand and take the politics out of this and fund infrastructure demands needed to meet the growth that is forced upon us. Developers need to take more responsibility for meeting the infrastructure shortfalls created by the developments, as well as those that are non-sequentially developed, thus creating more pressure on council to plug the gaps created in these developments. Mid last year, according to ABS data, our population reached 228,088 residents. Our birth rate is around 85 to 90 babies per week born to Windham mums, and approximately 162 residents are moving into Windham every week. Between 2011 and 2016, according to the 2016 ABS stats, our population increased by 34%. or 55,545, and we're projected to exceed 425,000 residents by 2036. That was actually a typo. I had 42,000. We're way past that. Growth councils, in particular, Windham, need to provide in excess of 160 services to its residents. Services our residents demand and need. However, more and more the cost-shifting burden is passed on to council, and then we are hit with the unfounded comments of sticking to roads, rates and rubbish. Residents pay numerous taxes and other contributions, and so we should, but it should be fair and equitable. And both councils and residents should not be expected to survive under the overpowering pressure forced upon them. Pressures on councils to continually try and meet their infrastructure pressures are with inadequate grants and funding allocation, and residents who are expected to try and get to work and navigate the unsatisfactory congestion on our roads due to inadequate funding on numerous infrastructure needs to meet our growth council. Our capital expenditure for new infrastructure and infrastructure renewal in the 17-18 financial year is approximately $130 million. And at this level, it is at this level almost every year, and will only face added pressure every year to meet our rapidly growing assets, which currently are in the vicinity of $3.53 billion. We are gifted, and I say that with a smirk on my face, because I believe we should be, I should say, penalised. We're approximately $220 million of infrastructure assets added to our asset base each year, which we then have to renew. When growth councils like Windham are trying to manage their infrastructure needs and capital works budgets, there are a number of items that need further consideration and analysis of the impacts they have on council. In particular, one I wish to highlight is when we are carrying out works in this city and during construction, we identify undocumented utility infrastructure in the ground, which then we are then expected, Mr. Mayor, to meet the cost of shifting. Not the utility providers, council. This, I believe, is unfair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Comments, councillors? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do support the recommendation tonight based on a few factors, and Councillor Maynard has touched on some of these, but I will just repeat a few of them. By the year 2036, our population will be at 435,832 people, an increase of 82.53%. By the year 2036, dwellings will increase by 76,826, with Tarneit expected to increase by 20,000 plus, Werribee by 11,000 plus, and Windham Vale and Little River by 9,000 plus. We continue to talk about our unprecedented growth, the largest and fastest in Australia, but I just hope the right people are really, truly listening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Any other comments? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's worth adding some more. Let's drill into this a bit more in relation to this topic. I think it's been rightly raised by Councillor Maynard and Councillor Shaw, the level of growth. And one of the things that the report touches on isn't so much around rates being the predominant in terms of rate growth. It's been more about dwelling approvals, and that being the golden way for us to increase our revenue over the forward years. However, I think that is a misconceived view, in large part because it doesn't deal with the infrastructure costs that we will have to upkeep over the 10 to 20 year period that's been outlined. And so what I did is I went and I had a look at research, because local government is predominantly about advocacy to the state and federal levels. And so I looked at the investment of the state government, and we're talking billions of dollars worth of investment by the Victorian government, and good on them for doing so in this city. But I looked at the federal government, and I looked at the federal budget, and I looked at the federal infrastructure program, Mr. Mayor, and what I saw was only $200,000 being allocated out of a multi-million-dollar infrastructure fund. $200,000. 87 babies born last week will be more GST revenue to the federal government than the amount of money that we just received as a community here in the city of Wyndham. Put that in context about the level of investment that the federal government is putting into infrastructure versus that of the states. And then there was a conversation in this report around debt, and we need to have a conversation about debt. Because if you look at the Victorian government's position, they're saying that we should borrow more to pay for the infrastructure. So all of you, as well as me as a ratepayer, as well as other councillors, having to take on more debt as a community in order to fund the infrastructure challenges of the future. That poses questions around whether or not, if we go into chaos in the times ahead, whether that requires us to sell assets, for example, to service that debt. That is a conversation that we're going to have as a result of the Fair Go rates framework. And I'm very worried about the conversation about a user pays model, because that's also what's outlined in that report. When we talked about the kindergartens that we're investing in tonight, that is publicly owned and publicly operated. Not getting people with the money that may be able to afford private providers in terms of all the extras that can come with because you might have a little bit more wealth than the other person. It is about delivering for the people, for everybody, regardless of your income or your postcode. That is what we should believe in. That is what we do believe in. But the issue of this policy is that it essentially says that if you can afford it, you should pay for it. And in some respects, that leaves a lot of our community out because there are people in this community that can't pay for it. And that is another consideration that this report clearly outlines. The final thing I'll say, and it supports this argument, is that if we looked at the demographic profiler, which is Atlas ID, every age group, according to the 2016 census, relies more on the assistance given by local government than they can afford in terms of the greater metropolitan average. So you take that into account. That does not add up with the conversation about people being able to afford it when there are more people relying on services here in the city of Windham than there are in the greater metropolitan average. It doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. And so I think the ARIP report says all that it needs to say, and I will finalise on this point. The report itself says that they should, the Essential Services Commission, adopt a model to calculate rate cap growth that essentially meets all of the criteria that we meet. 6% growth, they say anything more than 3%, we should be able to raise our rates beyond the rate cap. So I don't know, but this report certainly vindicates the arguments that have been made by multiple councillors tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I would like to echo my colleagues' comments about this report, and just to put it in simple terms for the folks at home and in the audience, at the moment, as a council, we're in a V8 car, barrelling down a freeway of population growth. We're not behind the wheel. The federal and state governments are both in hand holding the wheel. And when that car runs out of petrol, who pays for it? We do, as a community. Now, there's only three ways we do that. Either rates, grants from the government if we're lucky, or loans. Now, I don't think it's fair to be asking the next generation of Windham residents to be footing the bill for something that the state and federal governments have a moral responsibility to look after. So I'm absolutely love this report. It highlights exactly where the faults are. Now, we're looking at rate capping as an issue, and we're asking, and we've got to be responsible here. We are a penny-wise council. So we are asking for a review of that, to have a higher rates base. We're basically saying to the community at large, we want to charge you more rates. But we don't really want to. It's a situation that we have to, because as a community, are we going to turn around and say to our kids, sorry, you're going to pay for it all? The federal and state government, they're not stepping up, so what else do we do? So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Any other comments, discussion, councillors? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, Councillor Josh Gilligan have echoed that what problems we're facing in what the state government and federal government is doing it. What I like about this report on page number 37 of 140 talks about the developer contribution are committed funds for capital works and therefore not available for the operational cost. So I think that's really interesting, saying that money we're going to receive from the property developers, that money will be used for capital works. That is very important. Now, we know that now, that a lot of developers are here, choosing the city to grow and putting housing here, but that's something positive come out of this report. We must use their funds to capital works, so which means, again, doing the roads and other essential services which is communities required. So that's a great report. And as other councillors said, that, you know, it's important for us to demand more from the state rather than putting the more burden on the community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Any other discussion, councillors? If not, I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Councillors, the next item is 6.4.1 with a recommendation on page 40. And do we have a mover? Councillor Shaw. The seconder? Councillor Maynard. Councillors, any discussion? If there's no yep, Councillor Shaw. Okay.
I support this recommendation tonight. This development is an increase of 24 square metres with no change to the maximum people allowed, which currently is at 285. The intent is to provide additional library space to improve the separation of activities within the library. It's also to improve some of the outdoor spaces and a reconfiguration of the internal layout to make better use of the actual facility. I support this motion as residents will be able to undertake a broader range of services, and having it close to a shopping complex means residents can actually combine some of their activities. It's not ideal to have 7 car parking spaces reduced, but I believe the benefits of this $4.7 million upgrade outweighs this in the longer term for our community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, any other discussion? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you have seen in the past, I make planning decisions not from a political perspective, but on policy. Tonight is no exception, as I'm unable to support the motion to approve the building and works associated with the expansion of the Point Cook Community Learning Centre. I've come to this view only after considering in detail the officer's planning report as well as information provided to councillors. I've come to the view that despite generally speaking the clear and beneficial expansion of more functional spaces for community use, I cannot support the car parking dispensation sought. I appreciate that there is bus access to the site as outlined in section 1.4 of the officer's report. I also note that a trigger for this application is the car parking dispensation sought under clause 52.6.3 of the planning scheme. Mr. Mayor, I have no problem whatsoever with the key issues and justifications for development as outlined in 2.5 of the officer's report. In fact, I feel the community centre upgrades are well overdue given the size of Point Cook and its continued growth. It's the biggest suburb in Windham at the moment. I appreciate that this is consistent with local and state planning policy, the purpose of zone and overlays, as well as the design limiting adverse off-site amenity impacts. However, I cannot accept that a car parking dispensation is appropriate, especially as we are aware of the city's growth and the pressure that is putting on people getting about in the city. Just look at Forsyth Road on Saturdays or any weekday. And car parking is an emerging issue for our city. Despite the mitigating factors outlined in section 2.5.4 of the officer's report, I have to say that we see many applications come before us where there are mitigating circumstances in respect to parking provision. I'd also point out that this library is currently the only library in all of Harrison Ward, servicing people as far as Truganina and Saltwater Coast. It needs parking spaces. We are the planning authority. If we're to push other organisations such as businesses to churches to community groups to meet community expectations for providing appropriate car parking spaces, how can we not meet our own expectations? Providing appropriate car parking spaces when we can see a clear need to do so. Surely we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. I recall my own time visiting the old library in Point Cook. For me, parking in its own car park back then was as rare as hen's teeth. Having to go down to the Point Cook Town Centre and halfway into it just to find a space to be able to drop off books. And now we have an application asking for a further reduction in parking spaces. We've just, in the previous item, discussed at length the pressure of addition of almost 200,000 people calling our city home within 20 years. One of the pressures we face is infrastructure, car parking spaces and roads. Mr Mayor, I believe we should, where possible, comply with car parking requirements for our own facilities, where possibly complying with that requirement that is set by law, particularly in areas where we're facing car parking pressures now and likely to face pressures in the future. This is a frustrating position to take as well, as the Point Cook community is in need of these planned facilities that are already under construction. But I would like to, but I make this decision, just like others in the past, asking what would I have said if this had come to before me before works commenced and I was across everything that was being asked. And the view I would form has to be consistent with that. It is a principle that guides my view tonight. The officer report states that there is a requirement for 85 spaces provided. The proposal provides 48 spaces. Therefore, despite only 7 spaces being reduced from the current site, it's a full reduction of 37 car parking spaces technically that site would attract. This application...
Councillor Hooper, can I just mention you are quite well over your time.
All right, this is the last sentence.
Okay,
this application asks ultimately for almost half the spaces required to be waived. I cannot support this application in its current form, Mr Mayor, and foreshadow an alternative motion for this phase.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillors, any other discussion? We've got Councillor Barn then. Okay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have no problem with the new design of this facility, and I think that's what the community needed. However, I do agree with Councillor Hooper's concern in the reduction of the car parking around the community and learning center. After the extension work, I think we will be expecting more people coming into this community learning center. And if we are not going to increase the number of car parks, we should definitely not reduce the number of the existing car parks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hahn. Councillors, if I heard correctly, and I want to clarify this, you did say, Councillor Hooper, that you will be foreshadowing a motion.
Correct.
So before this debate is finished, I actually need that foreshadowed motion.
Okay.
Or else you won't be able to foreshadow it when I have to put it.
Okay. That would be, the proposal does not meet the requirements.
You will get, just a moment, I'm sorry, I'm getting some strange. You will be allowed to debate, Councillor Khan, but I'm following a meeting procedure, Councillor Mcelhaney as well, in that I need to know what the foreshadowed motion is before the debate can continue. Okay.
Okay. The proposal does not meet the requirements of clause 52(6) car parking if the Wyndham City Plan. So it essentially fails the car parking requirements that it needs to make.
Okay. So, okay. Could you give a copy of that?
Mr Mayor, can I seek some clarification, please, before we go on?
Yes, but the foreshadowed motion needs to go to the staff so that they can get it typed up, depending on whether this motion passes or not. Clarification, Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I thought, Mr Mayor, if we were foreshadowing an alternative motion, it would be before debate occurs.
It's true. True. Okay, I'll get a ruling on that just to be on the safe side. Can they foreshadow during the debate, or it has to be before the debate starts?
Foreshadow now and then continue with the debate on the original motion.
Okay, all right. I've been advised that the foreshadowed motion needs to be mentioned now, which it has. It's gone to the relevant staff. We continue the debate because the foreshadowed motion will not get up if the original motion is passed. Okay. So, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, just like to be quickly brief. I would love to support this proposal. It clearly says that, you know, the zoning is commercial zone 1 and is mixed use zone. Under the zoning, when changes is this couple of types of zoning: residential zoning, the commercial use zone, and the mixed use zone. Under the Act, the construction or carry out the work for a Section 2 use in the mixed use zone, the community centre is actually treated as a place of assembly. So falls under the category, and that triggers the clause 32.0.8 of the Windham planning scheme, which is our only scheme. Under that, since it's becoming our commercial zone 1, it triggers the clause 30.1.4 of the Windham planning scheme, and that have a or you can say provision, the council can apply or the permit holder can apply for reduce the number of the car parking space required under the clause 5.2.065, and therefore I'm convinced with the officer's report, and I will be supporting the officer's report under that Windham City Planning Scheme is allowed to do so. We'll love to see that, there's more car parking, but let's get real now. Let's build a community centre. Would that the design, and the design is a good design. I know that we're reducing car park, but under the Act is allowed. So I know that we'll love to have where the space going to come. So we've got a question here now, are we allowing or not allowing? I would be choosing now to allow, unless the community enjoy the community centre and redesign, and let's move on. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's a great report. You're exercising the right.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor Mcelhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I also will be supporting the councillors, the officers' report tonight. We have gone through the process. The application was advertised and we didn't get any objections received. So I've thoroughly looked at the report and I will be supporting the report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mcelhaney. With the forbearance of the meeting, I just want to clarify, according to this map on page 49, just how many hundreds of car parks are across the road from the current car park that we're discussing. Would Mr Thorpe be able to answer that question? 500 or so? About 500. Well, Mr Thorpe, are you aware, I just want to clarify, because the main point of discussion seems to be about losing 7 parking spots, while I think there's about 500 across the road. Could you clarify that for me?
So, through you, Mr Mayor, I don't have the actual quantity, but clearly there are several hundred car parks immediately in the vicinity of the library.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because I am expected to vote on this. Okay, thank you. Councillors, is there any other debate? No. If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour of the motion?
Of the substantive motion?
Yeah, the substantive motion. Against? And 1 abstaining. Thank you. Okay. That'll have to be noted in the minutes. Okay. Councillors, because we've had someone abstain, I'll need all those in favour of the substantive motion. Hands up. Well, I've got an abstain, I've got a noted. Right?
There's no division.
Do you want me to call for the division, Mr Mayor?
Mr
Mayor, can I call for the division? Okay. Under that scheme, you can call for the names. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay. All those in favour, can we make a note of the councillors, please? We have Councillor Maynard, Councillor Villagonzalo, Councillor Mcelhaney, Councillor Gilligan, Councillor Khan, Councillor Shaw and Councillor Barlow. Those against? Councillor Hooper and Councillor Arnn abstaining. Okay, thank you. So that motion is carried and we move on. Next item, 6.5.1, 217-18 Capital Works Program, first quarter review. A mover, please. Councillor Mcelhaney. Can we have a seconder? Councillor Gilligan. Okay, discussion, councillors. Councillor Mcelhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I welcome the Q1 report on the Capital Works program into the chamber, but I'd just like to also note that we have 153 projects totalling over $130 million. And we've got one of the biggest capital works budgets of any Western council. And I did a little bit of quick research. Melton has 52 million for the 17-18 year. Hobson Bay has 33 million. Brinbank has 60 million. Moonee Valley has just on 36.9 million, and we've got 133 million. The one that comes closest to us is the City of Geelong. An ongoing review of the Capital Works program is vital to ensure that we maximise our ability to successfully deliver projects and manage financial outcomes against the capital budget we have set. The establishment of a project management office has enabled a robust governance framework to be put in place. This ensures that we are monitoring and testing key assumptions and developing project management tools, all aimed at improving our program delivery for the community. The quarterly forecasting framework and this resulting in the report to Council recognises that due to a range of reasons, there may be times and risks to timing, scope or funding requirements for specific projects. It is important that given both the size of our capital works program and the complex nature of our projects, we undertake changes and changes are identified as soon as possible, and we consider these opportunities to mitigate. This report has identified a number of adjustments as summarised on page 3. The adjustments relate primarily to those projects that are either not able to be delivered in the current year or where funding estimates have changed. This has provided an opportunity to absorb the allocation of funds committed for in-flight projects, and that is those that were commenced in the 16-17 year, as well as consider some new projects that have since been identified for early delivery. It isn't, with 153 projects going on, it isn't an easy task. And one of the things that over the last couple of weeks, I'd just like to thank our CFO for presenting in a manner that is more transparent than we've ever been in this chamber, and to our councillors and to the public, showing our capital works program. So thank you to Binder. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mcelhaney. Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll certainly add to those comments of Councillor Mcelhaney, and indeed the project management framework that this council implements on the basis of its business cases right through is exemplary. I don't think there is any other municipality in the state of Victoria that does it better, Melbourne City Council inclusive. So well done to staff on that. On the direct point of the adjustments for Q1, what a fantastic result for kindergartens in our community, where we fought very, very hard to make sure that the Victorian government put in its fair share of investment in this space. And now we've got them to essentially take on a significant part of the cost for the Tarneet North temporary kindergarten, and indeed the Windham Vale Primary School project in relation to tackling the shortfall that we were going to have. So in what was a very scary prospect, dare I say, that we were going to have a situation where there were not going to be enough spaces to deal with the very growth that we're facing in our community, those 87 babies we hear about. Well, this is a practical example of the impacts from an infrastructure perspective. We got the balance right, and well done to Jenny McMahon and Georgie Hill and the team for fighting for that alongside councillors. But good on Wyndham City Council for taking a proactive response, evidence-based, out there in the media, advocating for this issue, and we continue to do that right, and we will have a lot more goals to kick over the 4-year term. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I think it's great to see that reports coming out for that Q1, which is aimed on 30 September. So this is a report till the 30 September, and it highlights, as previous council have said, that, you know, it's $133 million of the capital work each year. That means we're spending $133 million each year in relations to the capital work, and Q1 is aims on 30 September, which we're actual expenditure is $14 million. We spend it on page number 74, as the report says, and actual commitment was as to be on 30 September, 46 million, 0.6. So EOFY, which is, I think the acronym, I could not understand that, but that looks like, yeah, financial year, obviously, and forecast for the budget equaling the 124 millions. So it's good to see that, you know, we have added a new project for this this quarter, which is 2.1 million, and that's really interesting. Say the councillor Josh Gilligan mentioned that now we're now spending $1.3 million to build a future kindergarten buildings. So that's great to see that, you know, and also though, the money have been allocated for the master plan for the open space, and which there is a new project I'm talking about. The list outlined here. And also though, we have a little bit of a change in the structure, lighting, the West program to be replaced. We were doing the Lighting West program, now need to be replaced by street light globes with the LEDs. I think we really support that. That's really good to see that, you know, we have sort of replacing the previous program with the new, and they're going to cost us $645,000. So I think we're on a track as far as the quarter one goes, and we keep as a close to watch what's going to happen in quarter two. But as it said that we have committed lots of money, which is $133 million. So, and it's also that if there's any has been reduction, this is $7 million reduction in the quarter one. That's quite a lot of money, 7 million, but there has been also a new program, so which is kind of a bit of a justify why $7 million has been taken out of the quarter one. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any other discussion? Councillor Hooper.
Just a quick one to talk about the pressure that we're under. Now, 130 million sounds like a big number, and it certainly is. It's more than what I'm ever going to see in my lifetime. To put, well, actually, no, we'll make that next year. That's right. But in real terms, City of Melbourne spending 160 million. Now, you'd argue the City of Melbourne is a much more economic powerhouse than what we are, and yet we're not too far behind when it comes to spending on capital works. So it just highlights that we're under significant pressure to deliver stuff that, again, it's not beyond our control.
Can I have a point of clarification?
Yes.
Councillor Mcelhaney has said that we are the number one spending 133 million, and Councillor Hooper said 146. So which statement do you have to believe?
I said 130. Can I just clarify for everyone in the chamber that may be a little bit confused about the money? Our original budget was $133 million and a few cents. In the 3-month period up to the end of September, there's been a number of projects that were identified that we wouldn't be able to deliver outside, because it's outside of our control, that we wouldn't be able to deliver. So there is a deduction of $7,461,000. And so therefore, we've got some money to spend that we can add into the budget. And if, Madam CEO, if I say something wrong, I'm trying to simplify this. So therefore, because we've got that money available, we have brought in other projects that were next in line, and they were the open space, the buildings, the future kindergarten buildings, which we've added money to what the state government has given us, and the other structures which involve the lighting of the LEDs. So these projects have been able to come in because other projects have dropped off. Okay, just like your budgets at home, you think your electricity bill's going to be $500, it's only $400, you've got an extra $100 to go and do something else with. So that's where we are. If I've read this correctly.
Thanks,
Councillor Shaw.
Sorry. I think it's been good debate tonight, but I also do want to highlight that whilst it is a high number in terms of capital works, and it's quite an impressive number, that all of these projects are not necessarily because we are under immense pressure. Some of these projects are things that we actually want to do that benefit our community as well. And if I look at one of them that come into the budget tonight, into the Capital Works program, is the Chirnside Park Master Plan. Something we've been talking about that for a long time in terms of how we actually use that community facility, where we have our new pavilion going up, where we have our pool, where we have our tennis courts, we have our bowling club. How do we actually use that facility in the best way possible for our community, and how do we actually activate it and connect it with our new Windham Park development, which has also been on the agenda tonight. So I think it's just important to clarify that we don't necessarily have a huge capital works program just because we're under immense pressure. They are actually things that we want to do and deliver for our community. Thank you.
Councillors, any other discussion? It's been time for.
If I get to finish my point.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just the overall point, which is what I was trying to convey, is that as a council, we're delivering significant spending measures. We have taken a $40 million loan out as part of that spending measure to avoid the mistakes of the past. This is in regards to delivering in Windham Vale area. Bringing forward the loan of the PSP? Armstrong Road works, that's right, to be more specific. Whereas I note that the City of Melbourne, its 160 million is completely self-funded. And I think that's something to really highlight for state and federal government counterparts.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion, councillors?
Mr. Mayor, so my question was, the Windham City Council is the most budgeted council for 133, or the Melbourne City, because previous council made a comment, we're the one who's spending most budget. So so now we say the Melbourne City Council is the head of us. Is that what you're trying to say? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No, I shall ask Councillor Mcelhaney. What would you like to say, Councillor Mcelhaney?
I've got it actually written here. I said we have one of the biggest capital works budgets in the West. Thank you.
Okay, so we have one. Not a problem. Okay, councillors, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Procurement policy update. On item 6.5.2, could I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Villagonzalo, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Maynard. I should say Councillor Gilligan. Sorry. Your arm didn't move, did it, Peter? That's what Okay. Discussion, councillors. Councillor Villagonzalo, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This council recognizes that job creation is one of many solutions to the major issues we have in Windham. We have a 7.34% unemployment, and only 30% of residents who are employed work in Windham. The rest spend hours traveling to work, hours they could have spent with their families. We need more local jobs for our local residents. We will continue the ongoing campaign to buy local and hire local, but this time we are more serious about doing more about it, more than just promoting and saying the slogan. We would like to see businesses and government projects in our city buy from local businesses and hire local residents. Council is determined to practice what it is preaching and is leading by example. Council decided on May 2nd, 2017 to establish a social procurement policy. In other words, we are committing to deliberately seek and or create opportunities for local businesses and social enterprises, as well as create local jobs for local residents whenever we spend ratepayers' money like the huge capital works budget that we have. Today's update is on the development of our social procurement policy is a milestone. We knew that changes in our existing procurement system will affect other procedures and systems within council. So for the past few months, we had a team identify areas of concern and defined the general direction of the social procurement policy. As one of the councillor members who participated on the procurement advisory group, I support the policy review that has been put forward for endorsement this evening. In particular, I am pleased that the intent of council regarding social procurement is specifically highlighted. Council has a number of avenues by which it can drive social value. And I am of the view that procurement practices can be a key enabler towards this. As the advisory group recognized in their discussions, Council's intent regarding social procurement needs to be supported by target objectives and outcomes that can then be operationalized. As stated in the paper, the second phase of our review will consider appropriate targets and outcomes for council, taking into consideration current activities regarding social value creation already taking place. This needs to be done in consultation with key internal and external stakeholders. This will then inform the internal operational groups in their ongoing development of procurement procedures and guidelines. I would like to commend Council for making that decision back in May this year, and the members of the advisory group for the work done so far. I look forward to the next steps and the journey ahead. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Villagonzalo. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and well done to Councillor Villagonzalo, as well as I think Councillor Shaw was also on the advisory committee, if I recall rightly. And I certainly echo the comments made by Councillor Villagonzalo, but also the fact that we're going to continue this journey, and over a 4-year period, and it's only evolving from this point. This is certainly not the end of the matter. And when you consider the investment that state and federal governments make in terms of their social procurement policies, whether it be the application of infrastructure projects and a mandatory percentage of apprentices being placed into those projects, a great example, in my view, of the sort of policy that we could look to strive towards. And indeed, my youth committee was considering that sort of scope around whether or not we can get mandatory quotas around young people being hired by the City of Wyndham. So I think we've got a journey to travel beyond just this policy update today. I think there is a lot of progress that can be made, but one of the things that does alarm me, and indeed Councillor Villagonzalo touched on, was that 70% of our working population here in Wyndham seek work outside of it, and whether it is a procurement policy that adds to how we resolve that issue, I certainly believe it is. It's one step in addition to many steps that can be made. But coming back to the point that I am so glad that this is on the agenda, because in my view, if it was not raised in the first place by Councillor Villagonzalo, as I've stated in many different spiels over the year, that I don't think we would be making the level of advancement that we are. So this will be a difficult journey. This will be a tough policy area. It will require us to make tough decisions as this goes forward. But I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of the next steps, particularly as this advisory committee continues in the social procurement space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Any other discussion, councillors? If there isn't, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you. The next item, councillors, is 6.5.3, lease agreement for community use, with the recommendation on page 89. Do we have a mover? Councillor Khan. Seconder? Councillor Shaw. Any discussion, councillors?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, this is the lease agreement for the community users. There are a number of providers, those early services providers in our town, and they obviously use our community centres. So in a way that we now that committing the lease for these providers, and we have a number of the facilities which is that need to be utilised. So council at the moment have 29 buildings that use with a range of early childhood providers. So obviously though, the officers can finalise their contract and things and make sure, that all contracts be signed by as per the standards and compliance must be met in relation to their obligations to the council, such as make sure that all have insurances and make sure that all got the checks and balances, police clearance checks and children's working checks. And I'm sure that will be part of anyway, that the broad lease agreement drafted by council or the extra provider, but glad to see that, we're utilising our buildings and offering the services to the wider community.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillors, any other discussion on that item? Councillor Gilligan.
Just very quickly, I think this is a good demonstration of us seeking to maximise the assets that we hold to further demonstrate why kindergartens must remain in public hands. And I think that is a critical component of, once again, the work that we're doing in terms of service delivery around this model, and making sure that it's a very clear and obvious commitment by this council that we won't be seeking in any way, shape or form to be looking at outsourcing this particular area of service that Wyndham City Council provides.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any other discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Councillors, the next item is 6.5.4, the provision of debt collection services. Do we have a mover? Councillor Mcelhaney. Seconder? Councillor Khan. Discussion, councillors? If there's no discussion, then I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. 6.5.5, Assembly of Councillors. Do we have a mover? Councillor Hooper. And the seconder, Councillor Maynard. Councillors, discussion? Councillor Mcelhaney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to note I was away on 2 occasions during briefings. One, because I attended the IBAC Anti-Corruption and Integrity Conference for 2 days, which was an excellent conference. And the other one was last week. I was invited from the Governor and Crime Stoppers to attend at Government House their 30th anniversary and handing down of awards. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gilligan.
Just a very brief point to make in relation to this. I certainly appreciate and thank the change of start times in relation to council briefings to occur after business hours. I think this is worth highlighting, that this was a change that we made and one that I certainly appreciate was undertaken and certainly hope continues. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any other discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Notices of motion, Madam CEO? No?
There are none, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, item 8 is council seal. There is an awarding of a contract for graffiti removal services. Do we have a mover? Councillor Hooper. Seconder, Councillor Mcelhaney. Councillors, any discussion on this item? Councillor Hooper.
I'm just going to be brief on this one, Mr Mayor. I am absolutely happy to put this forward. Not that the dollar spend of 1.6 million over 5 years, no one should be happy that we have to spend that sort of money to clean up what little shits do to our community. And I'm using that term deliberately because I'm sure everyone in this community would absolutely tire of what happens when we see what happens to our shops, our streets and our businesses. So I'm actually glad that we're initiating a program on that space.
Thank you for that, Mr Mayor. Councillor Mcelhaney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'll be supporting it. With 356,000 a year, it's certainly a lot of money, and I believe with council staff involved with this, the total cost comes to about 600,000 a year in providing services that we could perhaps provide on other key things in the community for our residents. So while we need it, it would be nice to spend that money elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gilligan.
I actually do want to touch on that point of Councillor Mcelhaney and simply say that a greater investment in terms of youth services is the way to bring down the sort of cost of graffiti removal. So certainly can see your perspective on this, but certainly hope on the other side that we look at as a result of trying to reduce that, what it actually means in terms of finding alternative opportunities for young people to perhaps do it in open spaces that are designated for graffiti. So I think in the context of the points that were just made, I think it was worth highlighting that.
Thank you. I've got a point with you just a moment. Point of clarification. Okay, I'll hear that.
Provide those services. We've got legal street art spaces provided throughout Windham.
Councillor, can I come back to you as right of reply?
Yes.
And you can then, okay, so it wasn't a clarification, you were making a comment. So okay. There's a technicality. Okay, is there, it's all right, no, it's just, Councillor Hooper said a clarification, but then you made a comment. There was no clarification, clarifying what the councillor said. So now, any further discussion? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think we're discussing here awarding a contract. So let's discuss about the contract. This contract goes for 3 years, and it's clearly said that, the council has historically outsourced the graffiti removal services, and it does not have the appropriate resources or capacity to conduct the services in a house. We know that the Melbourne City Council, they have their own way in says graffiti removal. You can call and they will come. So I think I'm really glad that council is only paying almost $1,000 a day to contract outsource. I think which is cheaper, because if you're getting his staff and getting equipment, maybe cost more. I don't know. The feasibility hasn't been done here, but this contract will be awarded for 3 years, and it says that I'm glad that it's been itemized. 10 people have applied for it, a tender, and the tender has been awarded for that. Dawning's Painting and Maintenance PTI Limited Company. So I think it's a pretty good deal in a way. We're only spending I know that we hate to spend that much money, but again, we have to deal with this issue. So I think $356,000 is not a big amount when you can see that the city is quite big and there's a lot of youth growing here, and not necessarily the youth is doing this kind of work. That could be anybody's putting the graffiti and or nonsense thing. But that covers $350,000 covers the 36,373 metres square of
Mr. Mayor, can I move that the motion be put, please?
Okay. I've got a motion that the motion be put, so therefore I must put the motion. So all those in favour of the motion, raise your hands. Against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Councillors, the next item is 8.2, the awarding of contract for Baldwin Road reconstruction.
Oh, sorry, I was just excited. Just put my hand up.
I'm looking for a mover. Oh, Councillor Maynard. Okay. A seconder. Councillor Shaw. Thank you. Discussion, councillors. Councillor Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, in supporting this recommendation, I'd like to provide the following. Total cost of this contract, including contingencies, as per the officer's recommendation, is $7,136,705 and a number of cents. The project involves a reconstruction and widening of Baldwin Road and additional works, which include additional bike paths on both sides of Baldwin Road, pedestrian crossings and bus stop infrastructure. New pavement, curb and channel on the northern side of Baldwin Road only. The southern side that abuts the railway track reserve will not have curb and channel. Also underground stormwater, drainage, associated landscape works and additional public lighting. I initially had concerns about the contingency allocation in this contract. However, officers have assured us that it is adequate, as they have undertaken significant service proving and investigations. They have also managed to consult all the service authorities and sought approvals prior to going out to tender. It is important to note that the reconstruction of Baldwin Road will commence from the start of Baldwin Road, obviously in Baldwin Road, at the intersection of the roundabout of Baldwin Road, but will stop 50 metres short of on the eastern side of the McGrath Road, Baldwin Road intersection. It is stopping around 50 metres short of the intersection, as this, from there forward, is a developer contribution payment intersection, which is part of the proposed works in kind agreement between Council and Lend Lease of the Harpley Estate. This works in kind is proposed to be delivered as part of the Baldwin Road programming and might be delivered in the coming months. This current project has always intended to end 50 metres short of the McGrath Road because of the realignment of Baldwin Road to the west and how it impacts on the intersection. The delay isn't a problem because the current intersection is in good condition. Ultimately, that intersection will be revamped as the development of the west progresses, as the development to the west progresses in Baldwin Road, and it will need to adjust to the new Baldwin Road alignment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Councillors, any other discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Councillors, the next item is item 8.3, the awarding of a contract for the reconstruction of Galvin Park Tennis Pavilion and Car Park. Mover? Councillor Khan. Seconder? Councillor Hooper. I'm sure you're waving your hand around there. Lucky it's not at auction, or else you'll be up for a fair bit of money right now.
About 324,000 a year, wouldn't it?
Fair enough. Okay. Councillors, any discussion? This happens to be in the Chafee ward, so I'd love to debate it, but I'm not allowed to. But anyway, if there is no debate, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Okay. Item 9, contract summary, Madam CEO, I believe is nil.
Correct, Mr. Mayor.
And Madam CEO, item 10, questions with notice from the public gallery.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We do have a large number of questions this evening. So I will start. The first question, Mr Mayor, is from Greg Lehman, and it relates to an item on the agenda earlier this evening. The first question, I know Greg is in the gallery. Hi, Greg. Tonight. So the first question is regarding the Point Cook Community Centre. So why are 7 staff permit spaces being removed? So question 1. Question 2, where are the staff going to park? So through you, Mr Mayor, I'll ask our Director of City Life, Jenny McMahon, to respond.
Thank you, Madam CEO, and through you, Mr Mayor. And Greg, thank you for your question. So in terms of this the application to have those car parking spaces removed, that was, I guess, as part of the planning permit in the whole discussion around the community centre and the design and the activity that needed to occur there. In terms of where the staff are going to park, I suppose there's a range of options. Most importantly, I guess we encourage staff, as we do residents, to consider walking, cycling, public transport where it's at all possible, and of course car sharing. And in the event that that doesn't occur and they need a car parking space, the assessment from the planning officers was that that parking could be accommodated in existing places.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A number of other questions now. This one relates to the Wyndham Park strategy, again adopted earlier this evening for the purpose of public consultation. This question's from Lisa Heinrich, and Lisa's in the gallery with us this evening. So 2 questions. The first one, is there, in the strategy, is there a mention that Council have been consulting with VicTrack, yet nowhere does it mention if a fence along tracks is planned in the redevelopment, will a fence be constructed? So that's question 1. Question 2 is, will the lawn at Station Place be accessible for Remembrance Day service, the Remembrance Day service at the Cenotaph on the 11th of November? So I'll pass those questions through, Mr Mayor, to our Director, City Economy Innovation, Kate Roffey.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Lisa, for the question. I'll just answer with regard to Wyndham Park and the train tracks. The VicTrack land obviously isn't ours. As you will have seen from the concept plans, we have access to some of those areas. That's been granted by VicTrack, but we don't have the right to fence it. You'll also know that there's a grade separation that's going on up in the Cottrell Street. That's on the list to do. However, we certainly are having ongoing discussions with both VicTrack, Metro Trains and the Regional Rail Link about fencing in certain areas. So this will be one that we have on our list for future discussions going forward. I'll pass to Stephen Thorpe to answer your second question.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. So the lawn in Station Place has been down for about 2 weeks. Next week we intend to remove all of the barricades to prevent people using the lawn. So we will have it available for the Remembrance Day ceremonies on the 11th of November. Sorry?
Which is Saturday. This Saturday.
Okay, so it must be this week. So, sorry, correction. The barriers will be coming down this week.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I think Cup Day's thrown us all this week. Mr Mayor, just we have a large number of questions, in fact 5 questions relating to the Indian Cultural Precinct. They are quite similar in nature, so I've picked out 2 that sort of capture the intent of all 5 questions, which I will read out just now. So the first question is from Ismail Ibrahim. Is Ismail in the gallery this evening? Thank you, Ismail. So the question is, as there is a lot of community from India in the Windham City Council, why is Council so reluctant to develop a cultural precinct? Please explain. So that's the first question in relation to the cultural precinct, and I will ask our Director, City Life, Jenny McMahon, to provide a response.
Madam CEO, and through you, Mr Mayor. Madam CEO, if I may ask, do you want me to take all of the questions together and answer them in one?
So through you, Mr Mayor, the way that I've handled this is I've actually picked out 2 questions that captured really all of the others. So in responding to both of these that I read out, you will in fact be answering all of those questions. I just want it noted for public record that there were 5 questions received for this item.
Okay, thank you. So I guess that the main part in that question is around Council's reluctance to actually have an Indian cultural precinct. And I'd have to say there is no reluctance on council's part. This was a proposal that was put forward by the state government, and hence they contributed $50,000 for a feasibility study. That feasibility study was something that council agreed to do on behalf of the state government. And following from that, there was I guess I term it a promise, depending on the outcome of that feasibility study, a commitment to provide $500,000 towards the development of a cultural precinct. So we have been going through a very, very thorough community consultation. We've had forums, we've had information on our website, we've had surveys, we've had opportunities for members from all of the Windham community to contribute to the discussion. We've also had a community reference group that's walked with us on the journey in terms of the Indian Cultural Precinct. So that report is close to being finalised. We're having ongoing conversations with the state government, and we're expecting and hoping to be in a position to bring a report to council before the end of the year.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, we also have another item, as I mentioned, another question regarding the same matter. This one's from Abdul Majib Sayed. Abdul, are you in the gallery this evening? Thank you, Abdul. So this, again, similar question, but specifically relates to the state government funding. So the state government of Victoria has allocated $500,000 for the Indian Cultural Precinct. Why has the council deviated from the issue? When is the cultural precinct being delayed, or when will it be delivered, I guess, is the intent there. From Abdul, through you again to Director Mark McMahon.
Thank you, Madam CEO, and through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question. So I guess I've in part probably answered that to the last question. But yes, certainly the state government has allocated the $500,000 pending the outcome of the feasibility study. Council's not deviating from the issue at all, so we have raised that. I think the only question that had been raised at one point, it was discussed as being a Southeast Asian precinct, and that might be what you're referring to. That was clarified through the consultation, and it was an option that was considered way back in the beginning, which I think was probably a couple of years ago now, prior to that $50,000 being allocated. So when is it? So we're not intentionally delaying anything. There's been quite a lengthy consultation process. We had many people make a lot of comments, whether that was through Facebook or in the public arena. We made a choice to contact those people personally and encourage them to participate in the consultation process. So it's probably taken us a little bit longer than what we would have liked, but we thought it was really important to make sure that we gathered the views of as many people as we possibly could.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Moving on now to the matter of rates, and I have a question here from Sunhill Singh. Is Sunhill in the gallery this evening? Hi, Sunhill, welcome. How are the council rates determined for residential investment and commercial properties within the Windham City area, and what factors are taken into account? So through you, Mr Mayor, I'll forward that question to our CFO, Binder, to respond to. Thank you, Binder.
Thank you, Madam CEO, and through you, Mr Mayor. The total amount of rates that Council is required is determined as part of our annual budget process, and then we apply a policy set of principles to allocate those total dollars down to individual properties. There are two key factors taken into consideration in calculating the final rates bill for a property, and that relates to the valuation of the property. And we have an external set of valuers that conduct those valuations for us, and it's determined on the capital improved value, which includes the land as well as any dwellings or any other improvements made to the land. So once we have the value, then we apply sort of a rate in the dollar multiplier to that to arrive at the final rate dollars that's payable. So our policy at the moment in terms of applying equity principles do weight commercial and industrial properties higher than residential. So for just assuming that all three types of properties had the same valuation, the commercial and industrial would pay a higher rates bill based on that. There are further sort of details on how we calculate in our rating policy, which is published as part of our budget document and online. So that's sort of a very high level explanation, but certainly if you want to visit sort of the details of how the maths works, more than happy to take you through that separate to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving on to a different topic now. We have two questions that are quite similar, so I'm going to join these two questions. One comes from Mary Agwill. Mary, are you in the gallery this evening? Hi, Mary. And the other question's from Kylie Harris. Kylie in the gallery, terrific, thank you. So this question both, in fact, relate to the provision of services for children sort of in the middle years. So as a council with a family-friendly city focus, is council investigating developing programs or activities specifically benefiting rather the middle years, so 8 to 12 years? So that's the first part of the question. I've combined Mary's question into this as well, which also specifically relates to the middle years, but Mary's emphasis is around how we support newly arrived children or young people into the middle years. And there was also another reference to disengaged young people. So if we could have a response through you, Mr. Mayor, from our Director City Life, Jenny McMahon, just addressing those key aspects of provision of services and activities to the middle years. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam CEO, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Kylie and Mary, thank you for your questions. So in terms of the 8 to 12-year-old age groups, it's actually an interesting age group it's becoming more and more to our attention, that it's an age group where probably there's a bit of a gap in a range of the services that we provide. So to address that, we are looking at developing a, I guess we'd call it a strategy. We do a lot of work in our early years space and we do a lot of work in our youth area space, but it's that gap in the middle that we really do need to focus on. So we're aware of that and we will be doing that. What I'll do is just talk about a couple of the key programs, I guess, that we do have, particularly for the middle years. And I guess a lot of it is focused on our library services. So we have a range of, you may be aware of things like our annual spelling bee, the annual chess tournament. We have code clubs, school activities, Lego robotics workshops and chess clubs. So there's a whole range of activities, particularly in the libraries, that are related to 8 to 12-year-olds. And we know that there's a number of our sporting clubs that really do focus on that age group as well. Since it's been brought to our attention about that group, we're starting to do a lot more work with our schools in those age groups. We know that that's a time for young children moving out of primary school and then into secondary school. So it's a transition type time. So we'll be looking at doing that, as I said, through that strategic work, but also just looking at the sort of activities we provide. There is also, just in terms of specifically around supporting newly arrived middle year children and their families. So there's a few programs that we've been able to provide some community grants to, particularly around through the Drummond Street Services, which is looking at family and young people, VICSEG New Futures, which is around strengthening family and community life. And those are two in particular that are focused on newly arrived families with children, in particular those age groups.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, two final questions. One from Deborah Kimmich. Is Deborah in the gallery this evening? Thank you, Deborah. What provision can the council chamber make to provide job opportunities for the youth and local residents to help make life meaningful and thereby reduce the crime rate? So through you, Mr. Mayor, again, I'll ask Director City Life, Jenny McMahon, to respond to that question. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Madam CEO, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So there's quite a lot that we do in the space. So Kate Roffey's team is responsible for our economic development strategy and the activities that might occur within that strategy to promote and encourage jobs in the area. But also we continue to work in a whole range of areas to encourage and promote, particularly local jobs, so that we can get local people working in local areas. We've got many programs to help young people to be job ready and that's about assistance with writing resumes, that's about interview practice and opportunities for them to talk to employers. And we have very, very strong connections with schools and employers to help getting young people in particular into those areas. So we've had a lot of involvement with the establishment of Wyndham Tech School, the implementation of youth employment programs. A lot of them are operating out of our Youth Resource Centre. We've also have a lot of support for structured workplace programs. So all of those contribute to that, as well as just a whole range of activities that we do to continue to engage with young people, to help them, to keep them studying if they can study, if they can't continue to study, to try and help them into the workforce.
Thank you for that. And through you, Mr Mayor, we have one final question, but prior to moving on to that, I just wanted to confirm that the question from Caroline has actually been asked as well. So thank you for your question. So it's been answered rather than asked, just in terms of Director McMahon's response in relation to the provision of support services to young people in the middle years. So that was picked up there as well. So the final question is from Pinky Gosh. Is Pinky in the gallery? Okay, terrific. Thank you. So what are the plans to improve the safety and security of Wyndham people, and how are we going to deal with the increasing crime rate in Wyndham? Stating the fact that we are aware that crime rate in Wyndham is very low compared to others. So acknowledging that it's low, but that it's increasing. So again, I'll ask our Director City Life to respond to that question. Thank you, Jen.
Madam CEO, and through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Pinky, for that question. So I couldn't start without saying that community safety is a very, very broad and complex issue, as you all know. And there's a role for council to play, there's a role for community to play, and there's certainly a role for the police to play. So we certainly don't have the authority to police crime, and that is the responsibility of Victoria Police. And once again, we'd encourage residents who have issues to do with crime to contact your local police. We know that there's a lot of work to be done, particularly dealing with perceptions of safety. So we know that people often perceive the area to be unsafer than what it actually is. And so the work that we do in that space, a lot of it is around grassroots, working with local communities, working with neighbourhood houses and working with local community groups to try and increase the activity, the local activity in streets, so that people feel safer. We also do a lot of work through our portfolio committee, and Councillor Mcelhaney is the chair of that committee. We're very, Councillor Kim is very active in the space and has really strengthened our relationship, particularly with organisations such as Crime Stoppers and Neighbourhood Watch. And again, that's us working very strongly in partnership with other areas, with other local community members, to improve the perceptions, if not the reality, of community safety in Wyndham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That's the end of question time.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Now, councillors, the next item is 11.1, which is councillor delegates' reports. And can I have a mover of that, please? Councillor Maynard. And a seconder, Councillor Arn. Thank you. Councillors, any discussions on any of these councillor delegated reports?
Look, just very quickly,
Councillor Gilligan.
I just thought I'd highlight 2 points. The first one is that we had a great principals forum that Councillor Maynard and the Mayor attended alongside myself, and I thought that was a great example of us working with schools in the community, and a great way for us to continue to strengthen that partnership. The other thing I wanted to flag was that the Education Learning City portfolio is looking at UNESCO affiliation as a smart city, a global city. And I think that was worth raising in terms of the context of that report, and obviously that's publicly available for review. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillors, any other discussion on the portfolios? If not, I don't get very much of an opportunity to have a say in the council chamber, but one of the reports is mine. So on the cultural diversity portfolio. And look, the portfolio is going very well. I think I've mentioned this before. One of the advantages is the actual cultural mix of the portfolio. And in the period of time, we're looking at a whole range of issues. As it says in the report, we had a study of the cultural diversity data of this municipality. We also had a discussion on the reflections on citizenship ceremonies. I asked the portfolio members to come along to a citizenship ceremony, some of who, like myself, over the years, came to this chamber and became Australian citizens. And just so that they could have a look at it from a perspective of being on the other side of the line. And so they're not there to become Australian citizens, but they're there looking at what we do with citizenship ceremonies. Is there something we can do better? Are there things that we can do that we're not currently doing? Or is the things that we're currently doing that we should drop? And I thought that's worked out really, really well. We always give an update to the Indian Cultural Precinct feasibility study. And with that, I must thank Councillor Hooper, who chaired that committee. And I was on that committee because of my portfolio. And let me say that there will be a report coming to Council in the not too distant future. It's been a very intense and very interesting period during that time. And let me suggest, and I'd like to support Councillor, I was going to promote you then, Jenny, but but I'd just like to support the fact that very clearly, and I know there's been some comment out in the community about the fact that this council is not in support of an Indian Cultural Precinct feasibility. That report will be coming to Council, and may I suggest that if anybody's telling anybody that this council is against having the possibility of an Indian precinct in this municipality, they're not telling you the truth. So let me suggest that you members of our Indian community can go to bed tonight and sleep in the thought that there is no internal movement against the Indian community. However, having said that, can I also say that we had recently, and Councillor Gilligan, I think you might be able to throw some light, we had a student social cohesion animation project, which was brilliant in talking about the different multicultural community members and how the youth are dealing with issues of racism, bullying at schools, etc. And I think that it was a great day, and I believe that those two advertisements that the students put together are actually being put on, tell me, I forgot. Do you guys remember? But the students actually made two 30-second advertisements against bullying and racism, and they are actually being put on social media. Okay, I was going to say SBS, but it's not. It's social media. So, and I think that that's a very good outcome because it is about all cultures getting together, and it's good to see young people are actually working on that themselves. And the last thing I just wanted to mention in this portfolio is that we are going to look at having a joint meeting, I believe, with the Safety Committee at some stage to talk about safety and how it affects various cultural groups. So that's something we need to sort out. Councillor Mcelhaney is the portfolio holder on safety. So let me suggest that all things being equal, that everything's going well. And did you want to say something, Councillor?
Yeah, I've got my auction card up again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I just wanted to touch on the Indian Cultural Precinct as well, in that the staff that have put together the work committees, the surveys, working with the consultants that also worked on the Dandenong Indian Cultural Precinct, the involvement of the state government with every step of the process that we've done. We have been nothing but a professional organisation working for the best outcome for this community, for the Indian community and every other part of it as well. So I really do want to stress that the work that we're putting into it has been fundamental, and I can't talk up the professionalism enough of our staff. They have been absolutely well and truly spectacular. So, and I think the quality of the work, especially with those consultants, like honestly, they were involved in that Dandenong process, has been without a doubt exceptional. And I can't wait for it to come before council so everyone can see exactly where we've been and the journey that's been undertaken.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for filling that part of it in. Okay, councillors, if there's no other discussion on the delegates' reports, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you. Any urgent business, Madam CEO?
Not this evening, Mr Mayor.
Councillors, we're moving into item 13, confidential business. Councillor Maynard, thank you. I'm looking for a mover.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, the motion is that pursuant to section 89(2 of the Local Government Act 1989, standing orders be suspended and this meeting of council be closed to all members of the public in order for council to discuss confidential business.
Seconded. Seconded. Councillor Khan, thank you. Let me turn the page. Okay. So you can open the doors. Can I have a motion, please, Councillor Maynard? Seconder, Councillor Khan. Councillor Maynard.
Mr Mayor, I move that the recommendations of the closed meeting of council with regard to confidential matters be adopted.
All those in favour?
Against?
Oh, no, I'm for, whatever.
You're not, you're more than for. Carry.
Okay. Where's Councillor Khan calling for division?
Item 14 is the close of the meeting, and I declare the meeting closed at 7 minutes past 9 p.m.